The Montana winter howled mercilessly as Eleanor Wilkins pulled her woolen shawl tighter around her shoulders, surveying the snow-blanketed landscape surrounding her isolated homestead. The blizzard had raged for 3 days straight, burying her small ranch under drifts taller than a man, leaving the world an endless expanse of white. 2 years since her husband Thomas had succumbed to pneumonia after falling through river ice. 2 years of tending this remote outpost at the edge of Apache territory alone. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The log cabin stood defiant against the brutal elements, but barely. Its sturdy pine walls weathered by countless storms, roof reinforced against the crushing weight of mountain snow with whatever timber she could harvest before winter set in. Smoke curled reluctantly from the stone chimney, fighting against the fierce wind that sought to drive it back down. Inside, Eleanor stoked the dying embers in the hearth, coaxing the precious flames back to life. At 42, her once auburn hair now streaked with silver, face etched with lines earned through years of frontier hardship. The year was 1876. The tensions between settlers and native tribes had eased somewhat since the Fort Laramie Treaty, but distrust ran deep on both sides, fed by generations of broken promises and misunderstandings. Eleanor paused at her front window, watching the snow swirl hypnotically against the darkening sky. Mountains loomed in the distance, their familiar silhouettes now ghostly beneath winter's grip. Even the wildlife had abandoned this stretch of Montana's Bitterroot Valley, seeking shelter from nature's onslaught in hidden dens and caves. She checked her pantry stores with practiced precision, mentally calculating how long her preserved food would last if the storm continued unabated. The isolation that had once seemed unbearable after Thomas's death now felt like an old companion, predictable, if not entirely welcome. Eleanor had built a life here, small but purposeful. Her skill with herbal remedies had earned her a quiet reputation among scattered neighboring homesteads, and occasionally even among the Apache, who maintained a respectful distance from her property. As she turned away from the window to tend her meager supper of dried venison stew, a sound penetrated the constant howl of wind, different, discordant. Eleanor froze, straining to identify the disturbance. At first, she thought it might be timber cracking under the weight of ice, perhaps her barn roof finally surrendering to winter's assault. But as she listened more intently, the sound clarified into something that sent a chill through her bones, unrelated to the freezing temperatures. A child's cry. Eleanor's heart hammered as she grabbed her heavy coat and rifle from beside the door. Outside, the wind slapped her face with stinging crystals of ice, instantly numbing exposed skin. Visibility extended barely beyond her outstretched arm, the world reduced to swirling white chaos. The cry came again, weaker now, from the direction of the creek bed that ran along the eastern edge of her property. Moving carefully through knee-deep snow, Eleanor followed the sound, using the creek's dipping contour as guidance through the blinding storm. As she approached the frozen waterway, dark shapes materialized against the snow, not one, but 3 small figures, huddled beneath the minimal shelter of a lightning-struck cottonwood. Eleanor's breath caught in her throat. 3 children, their copper skin and black hair leaving no doubt about their heritage. Apache. The oldest couldn't have been more than 10, a girl clutching 2 smaller children against her chest in a desperate attempt to shield them from the killing cold. Their traditional clothing, though practical for Apache life, provided insufficient protection against this unprecedented blizzard. Every instinct screamed caution. Relations with the nearby Apache band remained tentative at best, taking in native children, even to save them from freezing, carried implications she couldn't begin to predict. The territorial government maintained uneasy peace with the tribes, but individual settlers who interfered with native families often faced suspicion from both sides. Yet, as she stood there, memories of her own lost children rose unbidden. David and Sarah, taken by scarlet fever before their 5th birthdays. The pain, though dulled by time, had never truly faded. These children were someone's sons and daughters, desperately far from their people during the worst storm in memory. "Hello?" Eleanor called gently, keeping her distance so as not to frighten them further. The oldest girl's head snapped up, eyes wide with a mixture of terror and desperate hope. The smaller children, boys Eleanor now realized, remained semi-conscious, their lips showing the blue tinge of dangerous cold exposure. Eleanor set her rifle down carefully in the snow, raising empty hands to demonstrate peaceful intentions. "I can help," she said slowly, pointing toward her cabin where smoke still rose visibly despite the storm. "Food, fire, safety." The girl's intelligent eyes assessed Eleanor thoroughly, weighing imminent death against the risk of trusting a white woman. Finally, with a determined nod, she attempted to rise, struggling under the weight of her younger brothers. Without hesitation, Eleanor moved forward, lifting the smallest boy into her arms. His body felt alarmingly light, cold, seeping through his clothing. The middle child roused enough to walk with his sister's support, though his movements were dangerously sluggish. The journey back to the cabin, merely 200 yards, became an epic struggle against the storm's fury. Twice, Eleanor nearly lost her bearings, the white landscape offering no landmarks to navigate by. The children moved with increasing difficulty, the cold sapping what little strength remained. When the cabin finally materialized through the swirling snow, Eleanor felt a surge of relief so profound it nearly brought tears to her frost-numbed face. Inside, warmth enveloped them like a physical embrace. Eleanor worked quickly, practical concern overriding any lingering hesitation. She positioned the children near the hearth, building up the fire with precious split oak she'd been rationing. The 2 boys remained alarmingly quiet, their extremities showing early signs of frostbite. The girl, though exhausted, maintained vigilant watch over her brothers, her dark eyes tracking Eleanor's every movement. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. "My name is Eleanor," she said gently, warming water for tea infused with willow bark to ease the pain that would come as feeling returned to frozen fingers and toes. "What shall I call you?" The girl hesitated, clearly weighing the propriety of sharing names with an outsider. Finally, she whispered, "I am Nasha. These are my brothers, Tarak and Ahiga." The words emerged, accented but clear. The children spoke some English, though perhaps not fluently. "You're safe here, Nasha," Eleanor assured her, carefully wrapping the youngest boy's feet in clean flannel after applying a salve of her own making. "The storm is too dangerous. You must stay until it passes." Nasha nodded solemnly, though wariness remained etched in her expression. "Our father is Kitchi, war chief of the Tseyi Hada'a band. We were returning from gathering medicine plants in the sacred caves when the snow spirits came too quickly." The information sent a jolt of apprehension through Eleanor. Not just any Apache children, but the family of a prominent war chief. The political implications multiplied exponentially. Such a man would not rest until his children were found, storm or no storm. As she tended their immediate needs, Eleanor's mind raced with questions. How far had the children wandered from their camp? Would search parties already be looking for them, risking their own lives in the blizzard? How would Kitchi interpret finding his children in a white settler's cabin? The smallest boy, Ahiga, began to whimper as circulation painfully returned to his frost-nipped toes. Eleanor hummed softly, the same lullaby she'd once sung to her own children while applying more salve. To her surprise, Nasha joined the melody after a moment, the Apache version carrying different words, but recognizably the same ancient tune passed between mothers across cultural divides. "You know this song?" Eleanor asked, momentarily pausing in her ministrations. "Our grandmother sings it," Nasha replied, a flicker of something softer crossing her guarded expression. "She says it came from the time before separation, when all people spoke one language." The simple observation carried profound weight. Here, in the midst of frontier divisions, two musical traditions had preserved a connection older than the conflicts that now defined their people's interactions. As night deepened, the storm intensified rather than abating. Wind shrieked around the cabin's corners, finding every crack and crevice to send ghostly drafts across the floorboards. Eleanor prepared a simple meal of cornbread and venison stew, watching with motherly satisfaction as the children ate with increasing appetite, a promising sign their bodies were recovering from exposure. The younger boys gradually became more animated, though they spoke exclusively in Apache between themselves and their sister. Tarek, the middle child, appeared particularly fascinated by the cabin's interior, his gaze lingering on Eleanor's books, the hand-carved furniture Thomas had made, and especially the small mechanical clock that had been a wedding gift from her father. "It catches time?" he asked in halting English, pointing to the clock's swinging pendulum. "In a way," Eleanor smiled, pleased by his curiosity. "It helps me remember when to do things when the sun is hidden." Tarek nodded thoughtfully, clearly, fitting this information into his own understanding of the world, like how ants come before rain, and when juniper berries turn blue, winter follows quickly. "Exactly like that," Eleanor confirmed, recognizing the wisdom in the child's nature-based timekeeping, different ways to measure the same world. As she prepared sleeping arrangements, her own bed for the children, while she would take the rocking chair near the fire, Eleanor became aware of Nasha studying her with uncomfortable intensity. "Why do you help us?" the girl finally asked, directly. "Most white eyes fear Apache children." Eleanor considered her answer carefully, understanding the importance of honesty with this perceptive young girl. "I had children once," she said simply. "They would be grown now had they lived. When I saw you in the snow, I didn't see Apache children or white children. I just saw children who needed help." Nasha absorbed this, her expression thoughtful, beyond her years. "Our father says some white eyes still have unclouded hearts. Maybe you are this kind." The assessment, neither fully trusting nor overtly suspicious, seemed fair enough under the circumstances. Eleanor accepted it with a nod, understanding that deeper trust would require more than a single night's shelter. Sleep came fitfully to both Eleanor and her unexpected guests. The children, despite their exhaustion, startled at every particularly violent gust of wind. Eleanor herself remained half alert, aware that the storm could break at any moment, potentially bringing searchers or other less welcome visitors. The territories still harbored those who viewed all native peoples as enemies, regardless of treaties or peaceful intentions. Near dawn, Eleanor jerked awake from a light doze to find little Ahiga standing beside her chair, his dark eyes solemn in the firelight. Without a word, he climbed into her lap, settling against her chest as naturally as if she'd been his mother. The simple gesture of trust brought an unexpected tightness to Eleanor's throat. She cradled him gently, humming the shared lullaby until his breathing deepened into sleep once more. Morning brought an eerie stillness. The storm had passed sometime in the pre-dawn hours, leaving behind a transformed landscape. Sunlight glinted blindingly off endless white drifts, some towering nearly to the cabin's roofline. The pristine beauty belied the deadly danger of the previous night. Eleanor stepped carefully onto her porch, assessing conditions while the children breakfasted inside. The temperature had risen slightly with the sun's appearance, but remained well below freezing. Snow depths would make travel difficult if not impossible, for anyone without snowshoes. Her thoughts turned pragmatic. How long before the children's people could reach them? How would Apache warriors navigate these conditions? Her question received an immediate and unexpected answer. Movement along the eastern ridge caught her eye, mounted figures emerging from the tree line. Not 1 or 2 scouts, but at least 15 warriors on sturdy painted ponies, breaking trail through deep snow with disciplined precision. At their center rode a commanding figure whose elaborate headdress and bearing left no doubt about his identity. Kitchi had found them. Eleanor's heart raced. She hadn't expected search parties so soon, nor in such numbers. The Apache must have begun searching immediately when the children went missing, continuing even through the worst of the blizzard, a testament to both their wilderness skills and parental devotion. She turned quickly, re-entering the cabin where Nasha had already noted the change in her expression. "Your father comes," Eleanor explained simply, gesturing toward the window. The children rushed to look, their faces transforming with relief and excitement. They spoke rapidly in Apache, pointing out individual riders to each other with evident recognition. Nasha turned to Eleanor, her expression now openly grateful. "You must stand with us outside," she instructed with surprising authority for one so young. "So they see you are friend, not captor." The wisdom of the child's strategy struck Eleanor immediately. Perception would matter enormously in the next few minutes. She nodded agreement, helping the children into their now dried clothing while mentally preparing herself for the approaching encounter. Outside, the Apache procession had halted at the edge of her cleared property, warriors forming a semicircle facing the cabin. Their expressions remained impassive, weapons visible but not brandished threateningly. Years of frontier wisdom screamed caution in Eleanor's mind, yet she understood the importance of demonstrating trust. She stepped forward with the children, positioning herself slightly behind them to make clear they were free to return to their people, not held against their will. Nasha led her brothers with dignity remarkable for her age, her posture straightening as she approached her father. Kitchi dismounted in a fluid motion, his face revealing nothing as he studied first his children, then the white woman who stood with them. He was younger than Eleanor had expected for a war chief, perhaps mid-30s, with piercing eyes that missed nothing. When he spoke, his voice carried across the snow-covered yard with natural authority. "My children were lost to the snow spirits. Now they stand before me, alive when many would be dead." His English, while accented, flowed more smoothly than his daughter's. "How did this come to be, woman of the wooden house?" Eleanor met his gaze directly, understanding that honesty mattered more than diplomacy in this moment. "I found them by the frozen creek, Chief Kitchi. The storm was too dangerous for anyone, especially children. My home offered shelter until morning came." Kitchi listened without interruption, his expression revealing nothing of his thoughts. When Eleanor finished, he turned to Nasha, speaking rapidly in Apache. The girl responded at length, occasionally gesturing toward Eleanor or the cabin. Though Eleanor couldn't understand the words, the tone carried respect rather than accusation. When Nasha finished, something shifted in Kitchi's demeanor, a subtle relaxation around his eyes, a fractional lowering of tensed shoulders. He studied Eleanor with new assessment. "My daughter says you treated them with honor, that you shared food, medicine, and songs from the ancient times." He paused, the significance of this cultural exchange clearly not lost on him. "That you spoke of your own children, who walk now in the spirit lands." Eleanor nodded, unable to trust her voice momentarily as memories of David and Sarah surfaced again. Kitchi seemed to understand her silence, allowing the moment to breathe between them. "There is a belief among my people," he continued finally. "When a life is saved, it creates a thread between souls that cannot be broken. You have saved 3 lives of my blood. Such threads are not small things." Before Eleanor could formulate a response, Kitchi turned and made a sweeping gesture toward his warriors. Immediately, they began approaching in organized formation, each leading a second pony laden with goods. Eleanor watched with growing confusion as they arranged themselves in a circle around her cabin. "What is happening?" she asked, a thread of apprehension returning despite the seemingly peaceful development. Kitchi's expression remained solemn, though something like satisfaction now glimmered in his eyes. "You gave shelter without thought of reward. Such generosity must be answered." One by one, warriors approached, removing items from the pack animals and placing them in careful arrangement before Eleanor's cabin. Beautifully tanned hides, intricate baskets filled with dried berries and medicinal herbs, smoked venison and buffalo meat preserved for winter consumption. More practical gifts followed: a finely crafted bow for hunting small game, snowshoes constructed with superior craftsmanship, even a painted pony with distinctive markings that indicated special status. Eleanor stood speechless as the procession continued, the pile of offerings growing beyond anything she could have imagined. This was no token appreciation, but a substantial gift that represented significant resources for the tribe, especially during winter's scarcity. "I cannot accept so much," she finally managed, overwhelmed by the generosity. "I did only what any person should." Kitchi shook his head once, decisively. Many would not have opened their door to Apache children, even in deadly cold. Many would have seen enemies instead of young ones needing help. His gaze swept the surrounding landscape meaningfully. "Winter here is long and unforgiving. These gifts will help ensure you survive until spring birds return. To refuse would dishonor both your kindness and our gratitude." Understanding the cultural significance of acceptance, Eleanor nodded with genuine humility. "Then I receive them with thanks, Chief Kitchi, and promise they will be used with respect for their givers." Something approximating approval crossed Kitchi's stern features. He spoke again in Apache, and a small, elderly woman emerged from among the warriors. Her face, deeply lined with age, carried wisdom and authority that needed no translation. She approached Eleanor directly, carrying a single item wrapped in soft hide. "This is Liluye, our band's medicine woman," Kitchi explained. "She brings her own gift." The elderly woman carefully unwrapped the package, revealing an intricately beaded necklace featuring a central stone of turquoise surrounded by complex patterns of white and black beads. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, clearly representing hundreds of hours of detailed work. "Winter Spirit Woman," Liluye addressed Eleanor in heavily accented but understandable English. "This medicine piece shows 3 white circles protecting 3 turquoise centers. It carries power of protection between our peoples." With surprising gentleness, the medicine woman placed the necklace over Eleanor's head. The weight of the stone settled against her chest, oddly comforting despite its unfamiliarity. Liluye's weathered hands remained on Eleanor's shoulders a moment longer than necessary, her dark eyes communicating something beyond words, acknowledgement between women who carried healing responsibilities for their respective communities. "When spring comes," Kitchi announced, returning focus to practical matters, "my people move higher into mountain hunting grounds. Before this journey, we will visit again. There are things to discuss between your people and mine. Hunting territories, water rights, passage agreements. The implications weren't lost on Eleanor. This wasn't merely about gratitude for saved children, but potentially the beginning of more formal relations between his band and the scattered settlement communities. She was being positioned as an intermediary, a role both honorable and fraught with complexity. "I would welcome such discussions," she answered carefully, "though I cannot speak for all settlers, only for myself." Kitchi nodded, seeming satisfied with this honest limitation. "Words begin between two before they spread." To many, small streams join to make rivers. The philosophical observation struck Eleanor as profoundly true. Today's unexpected connection might indeed grow into something that benefited both communities, if nurtured carefully by those who recognized its value. As the Apache prepared to depart, little Ahiga broke away from his siblings and ran impulsively. To Eleanor, wrapping his arms around her waist in a gesture universal to children everywhere. She returned the embrace gently, aware of the watching warriors, but unwilling to reject the child's innocent affection. "You sing to me tonight?" he asked hopefully, his English simple but clear. "I think you'll be with your own family tonight," Eleanor smiled, smoothing his dark hair. "But I'll remember our song, just as you will." Nasha approached more formally, though her eyes now held unmistakable warmth. "My grandfather says, those who help without being asked are those whose spirits shine brightest in the darkness between stars." The poetic expression caught Eleanor off guard with its beauty. "Your grandfather is wise," she replied, genuinely touched. "I hope his words prove true." The middle child, Tarak, had been examining the pony left specifically for Eleanor. He turned with unexpected animation. "This is Swift Wind," he informed her seriously. "He is grandson of my father's war pony Thundercloud. Very smart horse. He understands people's words, if you speak with respect." The detailed provenance of the animal confirmed what Eleanor had suspected. This wasn't merely a useful gift, but one of significant value and status. "Then I will always speak respectfully." "To him?" she promised, recognizing the importance of acknowledging the gift properly. As the Apache mounted their ponies, preparing to depart, Kitchi approached Eleanor one final time. His expression remained guarded, yet something had undeniably shifted in his assessment. "Winter makes hard boundaries between peoples," he observed, gesturing to the snow-blanketed landscape around them. "Like river that cannot be crossed in flood season. But sometimes, when unexpected bridges appear, we must recognize their value." The metaphor wasn't subtle, yet it carried genuine significance. Eleanor nodded her understanding. "Some boundaries exist only in our minds, Chief Kitchi. Perhaps those are the ones most worth questioning." A ghost of a smile touched the war. Chief's stern features. Without further comment, he turned and mounted his painted stallion, signaling his warriors with a decisive gesture. The entire band formed into traveling formation with practiced efficiency, beginning their journey back toward their winter encampment. Eleanor watched until they disappeared beyond the eastern ridge, the enormity of the morning's events gradually settling over her. The gifts remained arranged before her cabin, tangible evidence that something extraordinary had occurred, something that defied the typical narratives of frontier relations. She touched the turquoise necklace thoughtfully, its weight unfamiliar, yet somehow reassuring against her collarbone. The sun climbed higher, transforming the snow-covered landscape into a dazzling expanse of crystalline beauty. For the first time since Thomas's death, Eleanor felt a sense of purpose extending beyond mere survival. A bridge had indeed appeared where none existed before. Whether it would bear the weight of deeper understanding between communities remained to be seen. But she had been given an opportunity few settlers ever received, to be seen as an individual, rather than merely a representative of encroaching forces. As she began the practical task of bringing the generous gifts inside, Eleanor hummed the ancient lullaby that had crossed between cultures, its melody carrying through the clear winter air like a promise of possibilities yet to unfold. Eleanor's first challenge after the Apache departed was managing the sheer abundance of gifts. The practical considerations of storing smoked meats away from vermin, preserving dried herbs, and finding space for the exquisitely crafted items occupied her. Throughout the day, By dusk, she had transformed her modest cabin into something resembling a trading post, with hanging bundles of herbs, stacked pelts, and reorganized storage areas. The painted pony, Swift Wind, as Tarek had named him, proved remarkably adaptable. Eleanor had approached the animal cautiously, remembering the boy's advice to speak respectfully. To her surprise, the pony responded to gentle commands with intelligence that substantiated Tarek's claims about his lineage. She settled him in the small stable alongside her aging mare, Maple, providing fresh hay from her dwindling stores. "You've come from a proud people," she told Swift Wind as she brushed his glossy coat that evening. "I hope I prove worthy of such a gift." The pony nickered softly, pressing his muzzle against her shoulder in a gesture that felt remarkably like understanding. As darkness fell, Eleanor found herself repeatedly touching the turquoise necklace, its weight both foreign and comforting. The 3 white circles protecting 3 turquoise centers, symbolizing her protection of the 3 children, represented something profound that transcended her understanding of Apache spiritual beliefs. Lilui had called it a medicine piece, suggesting power beyond mere decoration. Whether such power existed in the physical object or in the connections it represented remained a mystery Eleanor wasn't certain she needed to solve. That night, alone in her cabin, but surrounded by evidence of the morning's extraordinary events, Eleanor wrote a detailed account in her journal. Thomas had encouraged this habit, believing that frontier experiences needed documentation beyond official government reports that often missed the human complexities of daily interactions. She described finding the children, their night sheltered from the storm and the unexpected arrival of Kitchi and his warriors. "I wonder," she wrote as midnight approached, "if today represents merely an isolated event of gratitude or the beginning of something more significant." Kitchi spoke of discussions when spring arrives, hunting territories, water rights, passage, agreements. Such matters typically fall to government Indian agents, not widowed settlers living at territory's edge. Yet perhaps therein lies the opportunity. Official treaties have repeatedly failed both sides. Is it possible that informal understandings between neighbors might succeed where formal diplomacy has faltered? The question remained unanswered as she finally surrendered to exhaustion, sleeping more soundly than she had in months, the turquoise resting just above her heart. Morning brought practical challenges that temporarily overshadowed philosophical musings. The massive snowdrifts from the blizzard had begun settling under the influence of slightly warmer temperatures, creating unstable conditions that threatened her barn roof. Eleanor spent hours carefully removing snow load, thankful for the snowshoes that now allowed her to navigate the deep accumulation with surprising ease. 3 days after the Apache's visit, Eleanor noticed the first signs of increased activity around her homestead. A young settler couple, the Hansons, appeared on snowshoes, making their laborious way across the valley to check on her welfare after the historic storm. Their arrival presented Eleanor with her first opportunity to decide how much to share about recent events. Maria Hansen, 7 months pregnant with their first child, embraced Eleanor warmly. "We were so worried. That blizzard was unlike anything I've experienced since leaving Norway. Otto wanted to come sooner, but the snow was simply impossible until today." "I managed well enough," Eleanor assured them, ushering the couple inside, where warm cider awaited. "How did your cabin fare?" "Lost half our barn roof," Otto admitted grimly, accepting the steaming mug with gratitude. "But the livestock survived, thank the Lord. His words cut off abruptly as he noticed the transformed interior of Eleanor's cabin. The careful arrangement of Apache gifts was impossible to miss in the modest space. Maria's eyes widened. "Eleanor, these baskets, their native work, and those pelts." Her voice trailed off, confusion evident. Eleanor took a deliberate breath, choosing honesty over evasion. I had visitors during the storm, 3 Apache children, lost and nearly frozen. I sheltered them until morning. She watched their expressions, carefully before adding, their father came with warriors at dawn. These gifts were their way of showing gratitude. Otto's face darkened with concern rather than anger. Kitchi's band? They venture this far north? You know of him? Eleanor asked, surprised. There's little that happens regarding the Apache that Otto doesn't hear eventually, Maria explained. He trades occasionally at Fort Bridger. Information travels, especially about prominent war chiefs. Otto nodded solemnly. Kitchi has a reputation, fair-minded by Apache standards, but fiercely protective of tribal territories. You say he gave these gifts himself? Eleanor confirmed this, describing the morning's events while carefully gauging their reaction. The story could easily transform in retelling, a simple act of humanity becoming dangerous fraternization with potential enemies. To her relief, neither Hansen showed immediate alarm, though Otto remained thoughtful. This could be significant, Eleanor. Formal relations with the Apache remain tenuous at best. Individual connections sometimes carry more weight than official treaties. That's similar to what Kitchi himself suggested, Eleanor admitted. He mentioned returning in spring to discuss hunting territories and water rights. Otto exchanged meaningful glances with Maria. You understand this positions you as something of an intermediary? That role carries both opportunity and risk. I've been contemplating precisely that, Eleanor acknowledged, though I made clear I speak only for myself, not other settlers. Maria leaned forward, her practical nature asserting itself. What exactly did they leave you? Some of these items appear quite valuable. Eleanor gave them a thorough inventory. The foodstuffs, crafted items, medicinal herbs, and finally swift wind. Otto whistled softly at the mention of the painted pony. War ponies and their descendants are considered almost sacred, he explained. Such a gift indicates extraordinary regard. Or calculation, Maria added pragmatically. Goodwill with neighboring settlers would benefit their band considerably, especially regarding hunting access. Eleanor appreciated their balanced perspective. Perhaps both are true. Genuine gratitude and strategic foresight need not be mutually exclusive. The conversation continued as they shared the midday meal, discussing practical implications for the broader settlement community. Eleanor was surprised to discover Otto's relatively extensive knowledge of Apache customs, gleaned through years of frontier trading. The turquoise carries particular significance, he noted, eyeing the necklace Eleanor wore. It's considered a living stone that brings sky powers to Earth. For Lilui to gift it personally suggests you've been granted some measure of spiritual recognition. This information both intrigued and unsettled Eleanor. I'm not certain I understand their spiritual beliefs well enough to appreciate such recognition properly. Maria smiled gently. Understanding comes through relationship, not merely knowledge. Perhaps that's precisely the opportunity being offered. Before departing, Otto hesitated at the threshold. Others in the settlement may view your experience differently, Eleanor. Some carry deeper prejudices than we do. I'm aware, she acknowledged, but I won't deny what happened, nor pretend the connection was meaningless. Otto nodded approvingly. Integrity matters, especially when navigating between worlds. We'll support your account when others inevitably hear of it. The Hansens' visit proved fortuitous preparation for what followed. Within a week, as trails became more passable, word spread through scattered homesteads about Eleanor's extraordinary encounter. Reactions divided predictably, some settlers expressing cautious optimism about improved relations, others voicing suspicion of Apache motives or outright condemnation of Eleanor's decision to shelter enemy children. Reverend Thomas Blackwood, circuit preacher who visited settlements monthly, arrived unannounced at Eleanor's cabin 10 days after the incident. His austere presence filled her small home with unspoken judgment. "I've heard disturbing accounts, Mrs. Wilkins," he began. Without preamble, after declining, offered refreshment. Tales of Apache gifts and private arrangements regarding territorial matters. Eleanor met his gaze steadily. "Not arrangements, Reverend, merely the possibility of future discussions that might benefit both communities." "Such matters fall under government jurisdiction," he countered sternly. "Individual settlers undermining official Indian policy create dangerous precedents." "With respect," Eleanor responded carefully, "official policies have repeatedly failed both settlers and native peoples. Perhaps understanding built through direct human connection offers alternatives worth exploring." The Reverend's expression hardened. "The Apache remain largely resistant to both civilization and salvation, Mrs. Wilkins. Your interference, however, well-intentioned, potentially undermines established authorities." Eleanor felt a spark of indignation at his characterization. "I interfered with nothing except 3 children freezing to death in a blizzard. Would Christian charity have demanded I leave them to die?" Her direct question momentarily silenced him. Finally, he sighed heavily. "Saving children is indeed our Christian duty. It's the ongoing connection I find concerning. These gifts," he gestured dismissively toward the beautiful baskets and pelts, "create obligation. You've become entangled in matters beyond your understanding." "Perhaps," Eleanor conceded, "or perhaps I'm beginning to understand matters previously obscured by distance and prejudice." The Reverend departed unsatisfied, warning that territorial authorities might take interest in her situation. Eleanor watched him go with mixed emotions, frustration at his narrow perspective, yet understanding that his concerns reflected widely held views. The simplicity of her life had vanished the moment she'd found 3 children in the snow. Whatever path lay ahead now involved complexities she'd never anticipated as a solitary widow at territory's edge. February brought marginal warming that accelerated snowmelt in exposed areas while leaving deep drifts in sheltered locations. Eleanor settled into a new routine, incorporating Apache medicinal herbs into her existing knowledge of frontier remedies. Liluya had provided plants Eleanor recognized alongside others completely unfamiliar, each wrapped with apparent purpose and meaning. Through careful experimentation, she began integrating these medicines into her healing practice. Swift Wind proved an unexpected blessing beyond mere transportation. The pony demonstrated remarkable intelligence regarding terrain and weather changes, often growing restless before storms arrived and choosing safer paths through treacherous conditions. Eleanor developed profound appreciation for the Apache, understanding of animals as partners rather than mere possessions. Visitors continued arriving with varying frequency. Most came from simple curiosity, eager to verify stories now spreading throughout the territory. Eleanor received them with straightforward hospitality, neither embellishing nor diminishing her account. A few, like the Hansen family, offered genuine support for potential improved relations with neighboring Apache. Others clearly came to assess whether her loyalties had shifted dangerously toward native interests. Late February brought the first territorial official, Indian agent Wesley Hammond, accompanied by a young military lieutenant named James Cooper. Their arrival on horseback, government credentials prominently displayed, created an unmistakable statement of authority. Eleanor received them with outward calm that belied her inner apprehension. Hammond wasted little time on pleasantries. "Mrs. Wilkins, I understand you've had significant interaction with Kitchi's Apache band, including exchanges of valuable goods and discussions of territorial matters typically governed by federal jurisdiction." his phrasing immediately established the encounter's adversarial nature. Eleanor responded carefully. "I sheltered 3 children during a life-threatening blizzard. Their father expressed gratitude according to Apache custom. That's the extent of any exchange." Hammond's expression remained skeptical. "Reports indicate gifts of considerable value, including a war pony. Such transactions typically require authorization under the Indian Intercourse Act." Eleanor felt her patience thinning. "There was no transaction, Agent Hammond. I received gifts freely given in gratitude for saving children's lives. Would you have preferred I refuse their expressions of thanks? Or perhaps you believe I should have left the children to freeze?" The lieutenant shifted uncomfortably at her direct challenge, but Hammond remained unmoved. "The law exists to prevent exploitation and maintain orderly relations with tribes. Private arrangements undermine established protocols. The established protocols have repeatedly failed both sides," Eleanor countered, echoing her earlier conversation with Reverend Blackwood. "Perhaps genuine human connection offers alternatives worth considering." Hammond's expression hardened. "Mrs. Wilkins, your situation has created considerable discussion among territorial authorities. Some suggest you've been unduly influenced by native interests. The implication was clear and dangerous. Accusations of divided loyalties could potentially lead to loss of homestead rights or worse." Eleanor straightened her shoulders, the turquoise necklace visible evidence of the connection Hammond found so troubling. "I've been influenced only by basic human decency and first-hand experience," she replied evenly, "something notably absent from most official policies regarding native peoples." The lieutenant unexpectedly interjected, "The children you sheltered they treated well in your care?" The question's sincerity caught Eleanor off guard after Hammond's bureaucratic hostility. "Of course, they received medical attention, food, warmth, and safety until their father arrived." Lieutenant Cooper nodded thoughtfully. "And the Apache demonstrated gratitude rather than hostility upon finding their children in a settler's home. That suggests potential for improved relations currently absent from official interactions." Hammond shot the young officer an irritated glance. "Lieutenant Cooper, need I remind you that military assessment of Indian policy falls outside your current assignment?" "My apologies, sir," Cooper responded with military precision that nonetheless conveyed little actual contrition. "I merely observe that Mrs. Wilkins' experience contradicts certain assumptions about Apache behavior towards settlers." Their exchange revealed interesting fractures in official perspectives. Eleanor seized the opening. "Agent Hammond, I've made no attempt to negotiate treaties or establish formal arrangements. I simply suggest that human connections might complement rather than undermine government relations with the Apache." Hammond remained skeptical, but appeared to recognize pushing further might create more problems than solutions. "Mrs. Wilkins, I'll be reporting this situation to territorial government. Should Kitchi indeed return in spring for these discussions, you would be wise to inform proper authorities beforehand." "I'll certainly consider appropriate notifications," Eleanor replied diplomatically, avoiding a direct commitment. After their departure, Lieutenant Cooper unexpectedly returned alone, riding back at considerable personal risk to official disapproval. "Mrs. Wilkins, I wanted to speak without Agent Hammond present," he explained hurriedly. "Your situation has created more interest than you may realize. There are those in territorial government who see potential value in unofficial channels of communication with Apache bands." Eleanor studied him cautiously. "Why tell me this?" "Because Hammond represents one perspective, rigid adherence to existing policies, while others recognize those policies have largely failed." Cooper glanced over his shoulder, clearly concerned about being observed. Should Kitchi return as promised, certain military and territorial representatives would value being quietly informed, not to prevent discussion, but to potentially build upon whatever understandings emerge. The revelation that her actions had implications beyond local settlement politics both alarmed and intrigued Eleanor. Who specifically holds this view? Colonel Williams at Fort Bridger for one, Cooper replied. He's increasingly convinced that the traditional approach to Indian relations ensures continued conflict. Your unexpected connection represents an opportunity few would have imagined possible. After Cooper departed, Eleanor sat on her porch, watching the February sun begin its early descent behind snow-covered mountains. The complexities surrounding her simple act of human decency had expanded beyond anything she could have anticipated. She was now potentially positioned between opposing government factions, settler communities with divided perspectives, and an Apache band whose own internal politics remained largely unknown to her. The turquoise felt suddenly heavier against her collarbone, its symbolism extending beyond personal connection to 3 children. Eleanor understood she stood at a crossroads that would define not just her future, but potentially impact broader relations between peoples with generations of mistrust between them. That evening, she added a significant entry to her journal. I begin to understand that the truly important boundaries are not those drawn on territorial maps or established through treaties, but those created in human hearts. When Ahiga climbed into my lap, seeking comfort, he crossed a boundary more significant than any government line. When Kitchi acknowledged my protection of his children with honor rather than suspicion, he transcended generations of justified distrust. Perhaps reconciliation begins not with grand policies, but with small moments of recognized humanity. March arrived with warming Chinook winds that accelerated snowmelt across the valley. Eleanor took advantage of improving conditions to ride swift wind on increasingly extended journeys, familiarizing herself with territorial features that had previously remained beyond her limited range. The painted pony's endurance and sure-footedness allowed her to reach viewpoints overlooking the eastern approaches where Kitchi's band would likely emerge when spring fully arrived. During one such excursion, Eleanor encountered a solitary Apache scout watching the valley from a concealed position. The young warrior made no attempt to flee when discovered, instead raising his hand in greeting. Though they shared no common language, his gesture toward Eleanor's necklace and subsequent pointing eastward suggested communication had continued between Kitchi's band and their unexpected ally. Eleanor returned the greeting with equal dignity, then deliberately removed a small pouch of healing herbs from her saddlebag, offering it to the scout. He accepted with formal thanks, presenting in exchange a beautifully crafted leather bracelet, adorned with geometric patterns similar to those on her necklace. The wordless interaction, conducted with mutual respect, reinforced Eleanor's growing belief that understanding could transcend language when approached with genuine openness. As she rode home that afternoon, Eleanor reflected on how profoundly her perspective had shifted in the weeks since finding 3 children in a blizzard. The abstract Apache problem, discussed in territorial newspapers, had transformed into specific people with names, families, and traditions worthy of understanding rather than fear. Whether such transformation could extend beyond her individual experience remained the critical question that spring would begin to answer. The first signs of true spring emerged gradually across the Bitterroot Valley. Snow retreated up mountainsides, revealing tender green shoots beneath. Creeks swelled with meltwater, their once silent voices returning to the landscape in rushing choruses. Eleanor marked these transitions with careful attention, recognizing that improving travel conditions would soon bring the promised return of Kitchi's band. As April unfurled across the valley, Eleanor's homestead underwent its own transformation. Using the abundance of supplies provided by the Apache gifts, she expanded her garden significantly, incorporating irrigation techniques she'd observed. During her wider explorations with Swift Wind, the painted pony had become an invaluable companion, his intelligence and endurance allowing Eleanor to develop a far more comprehensive understanding of surrounding territories than she'd acquired. In 2 previous years of settlement, most intriguing were her experiments with the medicinal herbs Liluye had provided. Through careful integration with her existing knowledge, Eleanor developed several remarkably effective remedies. A salve that accelerated wound healing beyond anything she'd previously created. A tea that reduced fever more effectively than willow bark alone. A poultice that drew infection from deep tissue injuries. These innovations enhanced her reputation among scattered homesteads, bringing increased visitors seeking treatment for various ailments. Maria Hansen's difficult childbirth, in early April, provided dramatic evidence of Eleanor's evolving medical practice. After 30 hours of labor with concerning complications, Eleanor successfully delivered the Hansens' healthy son, using techniques that combined frontier midwifery with Apache medicinal preparations. The grateful parents named their child Thomas. Eleanor Hansen, a dual tribute to Otto's father and the woman who had ensured both mother and child, survived. "The bleeding wouldn't stop until you used that special powder," Maria remarked during Eleanor's follow-up visit a week later. What exactly was in that remedy? Eleanor explained her understanding of the mixture, containing herbs she recognized, alongside others identified through cautious experimentation. Liluye provided extraordinary knowledge through those medicines. I'm merely beginning to comprehend their applications. Maria studied her thoughtfully while nursing her infant. You've changed, Eleanor. There's a certainty about you that wasn't there before. The observation caught Eleanor by surprise. Changed how, exactly? Before the winter, you seemed... Maria hesitated, searching for appropriate words. Contained within yourself, surviving rather than truly living. Now you seem purposeful, engaged with possibilities beyond mere existence. The insight resonated uncomfortably with Eleanor's private reflections. Thomas's death had indeed reduced her to survival mode. Maintaining the homestead became an obligation to his memory rather than an investment in her own future. The Apache encounter had somehow reawakened dormant aspects of her nature: curiosity, compassion, courage to envision broader horizons. Perhaps I needed reminding that meaningful life requires meaningful connection, Eleanor admitted. Isolation preserves, but doesn't nourish. The Hansen homestead visit coincided with increasingly frequent Apache scout sightings reported throughout the valley. Eleanor recognized these observations weren't coincidental. Kitchi was methodically gathering intelligence about settlement patterns, movements, and potential threats before bringing his band into closer proximity. The strategic thoroughness impressed her, demonstrating sophisticated security protocols that belied stereotypes about primitive tribal organization. Lieutenant Cooper returned in mid-April, ostensibly checking boundary markers, but clearly seeking updated information. Their conversation, conducted during a shared midday meal, revealed escalating tensions within territorial governance regarding native relations. Agent Hammond has submitted concerning reports about your situation, Cooper informed her, accepting coffee with evident appreciation. Fortunately, Colonel Williams maintains sufficient influence to prevent more aggressive intervention. What exactly does Hammond propose? Eleanor asked directly. Cooper hesitated. There's discussion of relocating you to a more established settlement area, away from Apache territories, for your safety, officially. And unofficially? To prevent the independent dialogue Kitchi proposed. Cooper's expression revealed personal disagreement with this approach. Hammond represents those who believe all Indian relations must funnel through official channels, channels that have repeatedly failed precisely because they lack the human element your connection provides. Eleanor absorbed this information with outward calm that masked her internal alarm. Forced relocation would devastate everything she'd built, both physically and relationally. "What's your assessment of my situation, Lieutenant?" Cooper considered carefully before responding. "Colonel Williams believes your position offers unique opportunity. Hammond fears that same uniqueness threatens established authority. I, personally, think the future of these territories depends on precisely the kind of bridge you've inadvertently begun building." His candor carried significant personal risk, something Eleanor recognized and appreciated. "And what would you recommend as my best course of action?" "Proceed exactly as you have been," he advised. "Maintain transparency with those who visit, neither exaggerating nor diminishing your Apache interactions. Document everything meticulously. When Kitchi returns, listen more than you speak. Commit to nothing beyond your personal capacity, but remain open to possibilities others might reflexively reject." The strategic wisdom in his guidance impressed Eleanor. "You seem remarkably thoughtful about native relations for a military officer, Lieutenant." A shadow crossed Cooper's features. "I served at Sand Creek before transferring to this territory. What I witnessed there convinced me that current policies ensure perpetual conflict rather than resolution." He didn't elaborate further, but Eleanor recognized his reference to the infamous massacre where peaceful Cheyenne and Arapaho had been slaughtered despite promises of protection. "Then we share hope that different approaches might yield different outcomes," she observed quietly. Cooper nodded, his expression brightening slightly. "Colonel Williams has authorized me to provide you with this." He removed a small journal from his saddlebag. "It contains basic Apache phrases and cultural protocols, compiled by military interpreters, imperfect certainly, but perhaps useful for initial communication beyond English." The unexpected resource touched Eleanor deeply. "Thank you. This represents precisely the bridge-building approach you described." After Cooper's departure, Eleanor devoted evening hours to studying the linguistic guide. Though rudimentary, it provided essential greetings, kinship terms, and basic conversational structures. More valuable were the cultural notes explaining Apache concepts of respect, gift-giving protocols, and meeting etiquette. Eleanor practiced pronunciation diligently, determined to demonstrate genuine effort when Kitchi's band returned. The anticipated arrival came just 3 days later, heralded by the same scout Eleanor had encountered during her earlier exploration. He appeared at her property boundary at dawn, waiting patiently until she emerged for morning chores. Their exchange consisted primarily of gestures, but Eleanor recognized the circular motion toward the eastern ridge. Kitchi's band approached and would arrive by midday. Eleanor spent the intervening hours in careful preparation. She arranged a proper meeting area outside her cabin, logs positioned as seating in a circular pattern, a small fire pit prepared for ceremonial purposes, simple refreshments, appropriate for sharing without imposing obligation. She selected modest gifts for Kitchi and his family from her own production. Honey from her recently established hives, bread baked with careful attention, and a special doll she'd created for Nasha using frontier crafting techniques. Most importantly, Eleanor reviewed Cooper's linguistic guide repeatedly, practicing basic Apache greetings and kinship terms with determined focus. While she harbored no illusions about achieving fluency, the effort itself would communicate respect more effectively than any single phrase mastered. The Apache arrival proceeded with ceremonial deliberation that impressed Eleanor deeply. Instead of the larger warrior contingent from their winter visit, Kitchi approached with a smaller, more diplomatic group. clearly distinguished by their formal attire and careful formation. The procession included Liluye, whose presence Eleanor particularly welcomed, along with several tribal elders whose elaborate adornment suggested significant standing within the band. Most delightful was the inclusion of Nasha, Tarak, and Ahiga, riding their own ponies with evident pride. The children's excited waves contrasted with the dignified restraint of adult warriors, revealing the universal nature of youthful enthusiasm that transcended cultural boundaries. Eleanor stood before her prepared meeting area, consciously wearing the turquoise necklace outside her dress where it would be immediately visible. As the Apache formed their ceremonial circle, she took a deliberate breath and offered her carefully practiced greeting in their language. Dagoti Shikis, Eleanor Dashijini. Hello, my friends. I am called Eleanor. The simple phrase, despite her undoubtedly imperfect pronunciation, created an immediate ripple of response among the Apache. Kitchi's stern expression softened fractionally, while Liluya smiled with unmistakable approval. The children giggled at her accent, but appeared genuinely pleased by her effort. Kitchi dismounted with characteristic grace, approaching Eleanor directly. "Your words honor our ways," he acknowledged, responding in English with equal courtesy. "Few white eyes attempt our language." "I have much to learn," Eleanor replied honestly, "but respect begins with sincere effort to understand." This simple exchange established the tone for what followed, a remarkable diplomatic gathering that bridged worlds typically separated by mistrust and misunderstanding. Kitchi formally introduced tribal elders, each receiving Eleanor's respectful acknowledgement. Liluye presented additional medicinal materials, taking evident satisfaction in Eleanor's genuine appreciation for previous contributions. The children approached less formally, Ahiga abandoning protocol entirely to embrace Eleanor with unrestrained affection. Nasha, though maintaining greater dignity appropriate to her approaching womanhood, accepted the handcrafted doll with visible emotion, running her fingers reverently over the detailed stitching. "You remembered us," she said simply, the observation carrying deeper meaning than its straightforward words suggested. "How could I forget?" Eleanor responded warmly. "You brought unexpected light to my solitary winter." The formal portion of their meeting began after traditional sharing of tobacco and sage in the small ceremonial fire. Eleanor had prepared for complex territorial negotiations, steeling herself for potentially difficult discussions about boundaries and resource access. Instead, Kitchi surprised her completely. Before speaking of lands and rights, he began, "Solemnly, we must acknowledge transformation that began with 3 children in snow. My daughter Nasha has dreamed of this meeting many times since Winter Moon. She believes Creator sent Blizzard precisely to create bridge between our peoples where none existed before." The spiritual interpretation caught Eleanor unprepared. "I wouldn't presume to understand Creator's intentions," she responded carefully. "I simply did what seemed right in the moment." One of the tribal elders, whose name translated as Standing Mountain, spoke through Kitchi's interpretation. "Right. Action without hesitation reveals true heart. Many speak of brotherhood, but close doors when storm comes." This philosophical observation led to deeper conversation than Eleanor had anticipated. Rather than immediately addressing practical territorial matters, the Apache leaders shared their understanding of relationships between peoples, complex spiritual perspectives that viewed boundaries as sacred trusts rather than mere property divisions. "Land does not belong to Apache or White Eyes," Kitchi explained. "We belong to land as children belong to mother. How can brothers fight over mother's body? Both need her to live." The metaphor struck Eleanor profoundly, contrasting sharply with American concepts of land ownership and development. "Yet we have different ways of living with the land," she observed. "These differences create conflict when not understood." Kitchi nodded approvingly at her insight. This is why we speak today, not to draw lines that cannot be crossed, but to understand how each people walks with Mother Earth, so paths need not damage one another. What emerged through hours of thoughtful dialogue was not a formal territorial agreement, something beyond Eleanor's authority to establish, but rather a framework for mutual understanding. The Apache explained their seasonal movements through the region, identifying sacred sites requiring particular respect, hunting grounds vital to their survival, and water sources shared through ancient custom with other tribes. Eleanor contributed settler perspectives, the significance of established homesteads, agricultural requirements that necessitated fixed location rather than seasonal migration, livestock management challenges during extreme weather. She carefully avoided characterizing Apache practices as inferior or primitive, instead emphasizing different adaptations to environmental challenges. Most significantly, they established communication protocols for addressing inevitable conflicts. Rather than immediately escalating to violence or territorial authorities, Kitchi proposed direct dialogue through designated representatives, Eleanor initially serving this role for nearby settlers, with potential expansion as trust developed. Small misunderstandings become blood feuds when proud men have no peaceful path to resolution, Kitchi observed. Simple protocol, 3 days' notice before hunting near settlement areas, agreement not to disturb growing fields, shared access to flowing waters, these prevent unnecessary conflict. The practical wisdom impressed Eleanor deeply. These common-sense arrangements addressed precisely the friction points that typically escalated into violence, yet remained entirely outside official treaty frameworks. Their simplicity offered flexibility that cumbersome government processes couldn't provide. I can personally abide by these understandings, Eleanor confirmed, and explain their value to neighboring homesteads. Whether broader settlement will embrace such arrangements remains uncertain. Kitchi's expression reflected pragmatic realism. Change begins between 2, then spreads to 10, then 100. We do not expect immediate transformation of all white eyes thinking, only opportunity to begin different path. As formal discussions concluded and the gathering transitioned to shared meal and cultural exchange, Eleanor found herself sitting beside Liluye. The elderly medicine woman studied her with penetrating assessment that somehow felt more personal than the broader tribal negotiations. "You use our medicines," Liluye observed in her accented English, "with respect and wisdom." Eleanor nodded. "They've proven remarkably effective, particularly for wound healing and childbed fever. I delivered a healthy boy last month using your fever-reducing preparation when complications arose." Liluye's weathered face revealed satisfaction. Medicine, knowledge should flow between peoples like water between lands. Healing recognizes no boundaries. "I would welcome learning more," Eleanor ventured carefully, "though I recognize some knowledge may be sacred or restricted." The old woman considered this with evident thoughtfulness. Some medicines connect directly to spirits, require special preparation and prayers. These remain with those properly trained. Others heal through properties Creator placed within them for all people's benefit. These can be shared with those who approach with humility and proper intention. The distinction revealed sophisticated spiritual and ethical frameworks, underlying Apache medical practices, far from the primitive superstition described in government reports. Eleanor recognized she'd been granted rare insight into knowledge systems typically closed to outsiders. "I would be honored to learn whatever you consider appropriate to share," she responded sincerely. Liluye nodded, apparently satisfied with Eleanor's approach. When summer moon rises full, send message through scouts. I will come for 3 days teaching. Bring young women from settlement who show healing aptitude, knowledge preserved through sharing, not hoarding. The invitation represented extraordinary opportunity, not merely for medical advancement, but for meaningful cross-cultural exchange, typically impossible within existing frontier dynamics. "I'll make appropriate arrangements," Eleanor promised, already considering which settlement women possessed both healing interest and sufficient openness to embrace such unusual instruction. As afternoon progressed toward evening, the children's perspective emerged more prominently through games that bridged cultural differences with universal playfulness. Tarek organized an impromptu contest demonstrating various riding skills, proudly showing Eleanor how effectively swift wind responded to subtle commands. Nasha shared intricate string games that created beautiful geometric patterns, patiently teaching Eleanor basic techniques. Ahiga simply remained close, occasionally leaning against her with comfortable familiarity that required no words. The children's natural integration of cultural elements, accepting differences while finding common ground through shared activities, offered profound lessons for the adults observing. Their unforced interactions demonstrated possibility beyond theoretical frameworks, embodying the very bridge both Kitchi and Eleanor hoped to establish between their peoples. As sunset approached, Kitchi indicated their departure. The Apache began efficient preparations, their practiced movements reflecting rhythms developed through generations of seasonal migration. Before mounting, Kitchi approached Eleanor one final time. "Winter storm brought unexpected meeting of paths," he observed reflectively. "Summer journey will determine whether these paths continue alongside or separate once more." "I believe connection, once genuinely established, creates its own momentum," Eleanor responded. "These children will remember a different way of seeing those unlike themselves. Perhaps that alone changes future possibilities." Kitchi nodded thoughtfully. "Small seeds create forests eventually, if properly tended." He gestured toward the surrounding landscape, where spring's vibrant growth demonstrated precisely this principle of patient nurturing. "We will return when promised, bringing those who trade furs and crafts. Perhaps commerce creates additional connections where words alone might falter." The practical suggestion revealed Kitchi's strategic vision, building multiple relationship strands between communities created resilience beyond any single interaction. Eleanor recognized the wisdom in this layered approach to peace-building that engaged different aspects of communal life, rather than relying solely on formal diplomacy. As the Apache band departed, forming into traveling formation with practiced efficiency, Eleanor felt profound satisfaction mingled with renewed purpose. What had begun as simple human compassion during a blizzard had expanded into something with potential to transform relationships across the broader territory. That evening, writing in her journal by lamplight, Eleanor reflected on the day's significance beyond immediate practical arrangements. "Today, I glimpsed possibility that transcends our limited expectations for relations between peoples long divided. What strikes me most profoundly is how unnecessary much of our conflict truly is, how artificial boundaries created through misunderstanding perpetuate cycles of violence that serve neither community's genuine interests. Perhaps the greatest wisdom lies in Kitchi's insight that land does not belong to either people, but rather both peoples belong to the land. When we recognize our shared dependence on these mountains, waters, and forests, different paths toward mutual stewardship emerge naturally. The children, Nasha, Tarak, and Ahiga, embody this truth most clearly. They see differences clearly, yet connect beyond them with natural curiosity rather than inherited suspicion. Perhaps hope lies not in convincing entrenched adults to abandon lifetime prejudices, but in raising a generation that never acquires such limitations in the first place. Summer unfurled across the Bitterroot Valley with vibrant intensity, transforming winter's austere landscape into an explosion of life and color. Eleanor's homestead flourished under her increasingly confident stewardship, its expanded gardens benefiting from irrigation techniques adapted from Apache methods. Swift wind proved invaluable for managing the small cattle herd she'd acquired. Through trade, his intelligence and stamina surpassing any horse she'd previously encountered. The promised teaching visit from Liluya occurred during June's full moon, creating ripples throughout the scattered settlement community. Eleanor had carefully selected 4 women to participate. Maria Hansen, whose difficult childbirth had demonstrated the effectiveness of Apache medicine; Rebecca Collins, a young widow with natural healing aptitude; Sarah Thornton, wife of the settlement's blacksmith and knowledgeable about local plants; and surprisingly, Catherine Blackwood, the Reverend's 19-year-old daughter who had approached Eleanor privately, expressing interest despite her father's disapproval. "He doesn't know I'm here," Catherine had confessed during her initial visit. "Father believes native knowledge contradicts Christian teaching, but surely God's healing plants were created for all people's benefit, regardless of who discovered their uses." The young woman's theological reasoning impressed Eleanor, demonstrating independent thought beyond her father's rigid perspectives. "Your participation would be meaningful precisely because of your connection to the church community," Eleanor had responded. "Bridges need anchors on both shores to remain stable." Liluye arrived as promised, accompanied by 2 younger Apache women identified as apprentice healers. Their 3-day instruction unfolded with remarkable meticulousness, combining practical demonstration with philosophical context that revealed sophisticated understanding of botanical properties, preparation methods, and appropriate applications. "This root draws poison from wounds," Liluya explained, "through demonstration rather than mere description, but preparation matters greatly. Harvested at wrong moon phase or prepared incorrectly, its medicine becomes dormant." The settler women observed with rapt attention as Liluya demonstrated proper harvesting prayers, processing techniques, and storage methods that preserved medicinal potency. Most surprising to the participants was the Apache emphasis on relationship with plants rather than mere extraction of useful components. "You speak to plant before taking its medicine," Liluya instructed firmly. "Explain your need. Express gratitude. Promise respectful use. Plants respond to honor or disrespect, like all creators' beings." This animistic perspective initially created discomfort among the Christian women, particularly Catherine. However, Liluya deftly navigated these cultural differences without demanding conformity to Apache spiritual frameworks. "Prayers can follow your tradition," she acknowledged when Catherine raised questions. "Words matter less than genuine respect for life within plant. Even Jesus spoke to plants in your sacred stories. Yes? Cursed fig tree that gave no fruit. Plants hear intentions clearly." This unexpected biblical reference, demonstrating Liluya's exposure to Christian teaching, perhaps through mission contact, created a breakthrough moment. Catherine's expression transformed from uncertainty to revelation. "The underlying principle transcends specific religious forms," she observed thoughtfully. "Approaching creation with respect rather than mere utility aligns with stewardship teachings throughout Scripture." This theological bridge-building allowed the Christian women to embrace practical knowledge without feeling they compromised faith commitments, a crucial development for broader community acceptance of cross-cultural exchange. The teaching culminated in practical exercises where participants demonstrated newly acquired skills, preparing various medicines under Liluya's critical assessment. Eleanor was struck by how effortlessly the women had moved beyond initial cultural barriers to form genuine connections with their Apache instructors, sharing meals, exchanging personal stories, and even swapping traditional songs during evening gatherings. On the final evening, as they shared a celebratory meal, highlighting foods from both traditions, Liluye presented each participant with a small medicine bundle containing seeds, dried plants, and prepared remedies. "These help you begin your own medicine gardens," she explained. "Some plants grow well near houses, others require wild places with proper soil and light. Learn where each belongs. Respect its nature rather than forcing growth where it cannot thrive." The metaphorical significance wasn't lost on Eleanor. Relationships between peoples, like plants, required appropriate conditions and respect for inherent nature rather than forced assimilation. As the Apache healers prepared for departure the following morning, Liluye approached Eleanor privately. "You have created good beginning," she observed, gesturing toward the settler women gathering their belongings. "They return to their people carrying more than medicine plants. They carry new understanding." "Will it be sufficient?" Eleanor questioned, aware of continuing resistance among some settlement factions. Liluye's weathered face revealed ancient wisdom. "Change moves like river, sometimes visible on surface, sometimes underground, but always flowing forward. What matters is direction, not speed." This philosophical perspective sustained Eleanor through the challenges that followed. As news of the medicine teaching spread throughout the settlement, reactions divided predictably along established lines. Those who had already demonstrated openness to improved relations welcomed the practical benefits of expanded medical knowledge. Others, led by Reverend Blackwood, condemned what they characterized as dangerous cultural contamination. The situation intensified when Catherine Blackwood developed a highly effective cough remedy using Apache preparation methods successfully, treating several children suffering from summer respiratory ailments. The Reverend, discovering his daughter's involvement after the fact, publicly denounced Eleanor for corrupting Christian youth with pagan practices. The confrontation occurred during a community gathering at the small settlement church where Blackwood abandoned his prepared sermon to address what he termed spiritual infiltration of settlement life. "Mrs. Wilkins may have good intentions," he declared from his pulpit, "but exchanging spiritual practices with those who remain in darkness threatens the very foundations of our Christian community. Medicine cannot be separated from underlying spiritual allegiances." Eleanor, seated quietly at the rear of the congregation, made no immediate response. However, Otto Hansen rose unexpectedly, his voice carrying the respect earned through consistent community service. "Respectfully, Reverend, my son lives because of knowledge shared between Mrs. Wilkins and the Apache healers. Would you suggest God intended for Christian mothers to die in childbirth rather than benefit from medicines he created but revealed to different peoples?" The theological challenge created visible discomfort among the congregation. Catherine Blackwood, despite obvious anxiety, added her perspective with remarkable composure. "Father, you taught me that all truth is God's truth, regardless of where it's found. The Apache understand plant properties God created, just as we understand rainfall and seasons without rejecting this knowledge as pagan." Reverend Blackwood appeared momentarily speechless at his daughter's public disagreement. The congregation's reaction revealed shifting community dynamics. Many nodded at Catherine's reasoning, while others seemed genuinely conflicted rather than automatically rejecting cross-cultural exchange. Eleanor recognized a critical turning point. Responding to Blackwood's accusations directly would create deeper division. Instead, she stood quietly, addressing the congregation rather than engaging the Reverend's accusations. I understand concerns about maintaining our distinct identity and values, she acknowledged. What I've learned from this experience is that we can exchange practical knowledge while respecting different spiritual paths. The Apache don't expect us to adopt their beliefs, just as we don't require them to embrace ours before trading goods or establishing peaceful arrangements. Her measured response resonated with the settlers' pragmatic nature. Several community members nodded appreciatively at this practical framework that allowed beneficial exchange without threatening core identities. Lieutenant Cooper's arrival the following week provided crucial external support during this period of community tension. He brought news that territorial authorities had taken official notice of Eleanor's unique position. Colonel Williams has submitted reports highlighting successful informal arrangements established through your mediation, Cooper explained during a private conversation at Eleanor's homestead. While Agent Hammond continues objecting to unauthorized negotiations, several territorial officials now recognize potential benefits in your approach. Has anything concrete resulted from this recognition? Eleanor asked practically. Cooper smiled. The territorial governor has authorized a formal trading fair to be held near Fort Bridger next month, explicitly inviting Kitchi's band alongside other peaceful tribes. This represents significant official acknowledgement of possibilities you've helped demonstrate. The news exceeded Eleanor's most optimistic expectations. Will Kitchi's people actually attend? They're understandably suspicious of official invitations. That's precisely why I'm here, Cooper confirmed. Colonel Williams believes the Apache would consider participating if you personally conveyed the invitation, explaining legitimate trading opportunities while acknowledging potential concerns. The requested role formalized Eleanor's bridge, position beyond individual initiatives. This represents significant responsibility, she observed thoughtfully. I've gained some trust through specific interactions, but I don't presume to speak for or to the Apache in official capacity. Your honest acknowledgement of limitations actually enhances your credibility, Cooper noted. The Apache respect those who neither exaggerate nor diminish their proper standing. 2 days later, Eleanor rode Swift Wind toward the eastern foothills, where Apache scouts maintained regular observation points. She carried the formal invitation written on territorial government letterhead, along with her own carefully composed letter, explaining associated opportunities and potential concerns. From her perspective, the scouts received her with now familiar recognition, one immediately departing to contact Kitchi, while another offered ceremonial hospitality, sharing water and small portions of dried meat according to Apache custom. Eleanor accepted with appropriate gratitude. Having learned these ritualized exchanges carried significance beyond mere refreshment. Kitchi arrived with surprising promptness, accompanied by 2 senior tribal counselors and, unexpectedly, Nasha. The girl's presence indicated the visit's diplomatic rather than military nature. Family representatives participated in peaceful negotiations, while warriors alone handled potential confrontations. The territorial governor requests your presence at a trading fair, Eleanor explained, after appropriate greetings. Unlike previous government interactions, this gathering focuses on commerce rather than treaties or land cessions. Kitchi received the formal invitation with appropriate seriousness, though Eleanor noted his eyes quickly assessed the document's features, official seals, signatures, formatting, with experienced recognition of authenticity markers. Why does Governor suddenly seek Apache traders? He asked directly. Previous years brought soldiers and demands, not trading opportunities. Eleanor appreciated his forthright skepticism. Several factors have influenced this change, she explained. Your band's peaceful interaction with settlement communities has been noticed, Lieutenant Cooper and Colonel Williams have advocated for commercial relationships as foundations for improved relations. Most importantly, practical arrangements we've established demonstrate possibilities beyond conflict. Nasha, listening intently, unexpectedly contributed. The medicine teaching was successful. The women learned well. Remarkably so, Eleanor confirmed, pleased by the girls' engagement. They've already incorporated several remedies into regular practice, with noticeable improvements in treating common ailments. Kitchi and his counselors exchanged rapid observations in Apache, clearly weighing various considerations beyond immediate commercial opportunities. There are broader implications in accepting or rejecting such invitation, Kitchi finally observed. Participation suggests willingness to engage with territorial authorities within their frameworks. Some warriors consider this first step toward submission. Eleanor nodded, understanding. While I cannot speak to territorial government intentions, I believe genuine commerce creates relationships that benefit both communities. Unlike treaties that often demand permanent concessions, trade allows each party to participate according to their own judgment and advantage. One counselor, whose name Eleanor recalled meant something like hawk, asked several pointed questions about security arrangements, potential restrictions on Apache movement during the fair, and historical precedents for similar gatherings. His strategic assessment impressed Eleanor with its thorough consideration of various contingencies and potential motivations behind the invitation. After extensive deliberation, Kitchi made his decision. We will send small delegation first, 10 traders with appropriate goods, 2 senior counselors for negotiation, and several women who create finest beadwork and baskets. Depending on treatment received, larger participation might follow in subsequent gatherings. This measured approach demonstrated prudent leadership rather than either naive acceptance or reflexive rejection. Eleanor noted Nasha's subtle smile during her father's announcement. Clearly, the girl had specific interests in the trading opportunity. "Will you attend this fair as well?" Kitchi inquired directly of Eleanor. The question caught her momentarily. Unprepared. I hadn't considered it, having focused on delivering the invitation, but I would certainly attend, if helpful, in facilitating initial interactions. Kitchi nodded decisively. Your presence provides certain reassurance. You have demonstrated honor in previous dealings, creating foundation for cautious trust. This simple acknowledgement carried profound significance, recognition that individual integrity could establish bridges where institutional relationships had repeatedly failed. The trading fair, held in late August in an open meadow near Fort Bridger, exceeded even optimistic expectations. Alongside Kitchi's Apache delegation, representatives from Shoshone, Ute, and even traditionally hostile Blackfoot bands participated, creating unprecedented commercial exchange beyond standard. Government-supervised trading posts. Eleanor's role evolved beyond mere introduction to active facilitation of cross-cultural commerce. Her cabin's transformation following the winter encounter had equipped her with practical understanding of native crafts' quality and appropriate valuation, allowing her to prevent exploitative exchanges while ensuring fair compensation for exceptional workmanship. Most striking was watching Nasha emerge as a natural diplomat, her youthful enthusiasm balanced by remarkable cultural sensitivity as she guided Apache women displaying intricate beadwork and woven baskets. Despite having just entered her 12th year, the girl demonstrated sophistication beyond her age when explaining cultural significance behind designs to curious settlers. This pattern represents mountain paths returning to summer hunting grounds, she explained to a fascinated Catherine Blackwood, who had defied her father's objections to attend. The white lines show snow melting between peaks, revealing trails hidden during winter moons. Catherine traced the pattern reverently. Its mathematics expressed through beauty, sequences and proportions capturing natural cycles. Nasha's delighted response to this unexpectedly sophisticated interpretation created immediate connection between girls from radically different backgrounds. They spent hours comparing cultural expressions, Catherine explaining Christian symbolism in church architecture, while Nasha demonstrated how Apache beadwork incorporated astronomical observations. Eleanor watched their interaction with profound satisfaction, recognizing that such youthful connections might ultimately prove more transformative than formal agreements between leaders. These girls would eventually become women of influence within their respective communities, carrying memories of genuine exchange rather than inherited suspicion. The fair concluded with formal acknowledgement ceremony where territorial representatives and tribal leaders exchanged symbolic gifts. Governor Morrison himself attended briefly, making carefully prepared remarks that recognized the historic significance of peaceful commerce between previously antagonistic groups. Today we have demonstrated possibility beyond conflict, he stated in language clearly influenced by progressive military officers like Colonel Williams. When goods flow freely between communities, understanding follows naturally through human connections established in honest exchange. More significant than such official pronouncements were the dozens of individual relationships established during the three-day gathering. Merchants who discovered reliable trading partners, artisans who recognized kindred creative spirits across cultural boundaries, families who shared meals and stories despite linguistic challenges. Eleanor documented these connections meticulously in her journal, recognizing that official records would focus on quantifiable outcomes like trade volume, rather than these human elements that ultimately created sustainable peace. What historians may never fully capture, she wrote during the journey home, is how Sarah Thornton's genuine delight in Apache basket-weaving techniques created immediate rapport that transcended language barriers, or how Otto Hansen's respectful admiration for native horsemanship led to detailed exchange of breeding practices that will improve both communities' herds for generations. Peace treaties capture intentions between governments, but lasting harmony emerges through thousands of small human recognitions of shared humanity. By early September, evidence of the fair's impact manifested throughout the settlement region. Regular trading parties from Kitchi's band visited homesteads where they'd established trusted relationships, exchanging seasonal hunting products for agricultural goods. Eleanor's cabin became a natural waypoint for these interactions, providing neutral space where both communities felt respected. The harvest season brought opportunity for Eleanor to formalize certain successful practices. She carefully documented the medicinal knowledge gained through Liluyer's teaching, creating illustrated manuscripts that combined Apache understanding with settler applications. With permission from both Apache healers and settlement participants, she prepared copies for distribution beyond immediate communities. Knowledge preserved through sharing rather than hoarding, she wrote in the introduction, echoing Liluyer's wisdom. These remedies represent neither white nor native medicine, but human discovery of healing properties the Creator embedded within plants for all people's benefit. Lieutenant Cooper arranged for copies to reach territorial medical authorities, military physicians, and even several Eastern universities, creating documented evidence of valuable indigenous knowledge typically dismissed by scientific establishments. Eleanor harbored no illusions about immediate academic acceptance, but recognized the importance of preserving and disseminating these healing traditions beyond oral transmission. Most significant among autumn developments was the territorial governor's formal recognition of Eleanor's unique role. An official letter arrived in October, appointing her special liaison for native relations within the Bitterroot settlement region, with modest stipend attached. While this appointment carries no authority to negotiate treaties or establish formal territorial agreements, the document clarified, it acknowledges valuable service in facilitating productive communication between settlement communities and neighboring tribes, particularly Kitchi's Apache band. The recognition carried practical benefits beyond financial support. It provided official sanction for Eleanor's mediation activities, protecting her from accusations of unauthorized interference in government Indian policy. Agent Hammond, though, clearly displeased with this development, could no longer threaten displacement based on her Apache interactions. Most meaningfully, the appointment formalized what had already emerged organically, acknowledgement that peace required human bridges between communities, not merely institutional arrangements between abstract entities called government and tribes. As winter approached once more, Eleanor found herself reflecting on the extraordinary transformation a single year had brought. What began with 3 lost children in a blizzard had expanded into structural changes affecting entire communities. The turquoise necklace Lilui had given her now represented not just personal connection to 3 specific children, but symbolic recognition of her role spanning divided worlds. On the anniversary of finding Nasha and her brothers in the snow, Eleanor rode Swift Wind to the lightning-struck cottonwood where that fateful encounter occurred. The landscape had transformed completely. Lush autumn grasses replacing deadly snowdrifts, golden aspen leaves decorating hillsides previously obscured by blizzard conditions. Yet something essential remained unchanged: the fundamental human choice between fear and compassion when encountering the other. Eleanor realized her decision that night hadn't been particularly heroic or extraordinary, merely human in the most basic sense. She had seen children needing help rather than enemies to fear. "Perhaps that's the most important lesson," she wrote in her journal that evening. "Transformative change doesn't always require exceptional heroism, merely ordinary humanity consistently applied where artificial divisions suggest separation instead of connection. The borders we create between peoples exist primarily in our minds, reinforced through stories we tell about those who differ from ourselves. When Ahiga climbed trustingly into my lap that first night, seeking comfort as any child would, he crossed boundaries more significant than any territorial line. When Kitchi acknowledged my protection of his children with honor rather than suspicion, he transcended generations of justified wariness. When Catherine and Nasha discovered shared fascination with mathematical patterns despite radically different upbringings, they demonstrated how artificial our supposed divisions truly are. The bridge between worlds isn't built through grand diplomatic gestures or elaborate treaties, but through thousands of small moments when individual humans choose connection over separation, understanding over assumption, shared humanity over comfortable division. As first snowflakes began drifting past her cabin windows, Eleanor touched the turquoise necklace thoughtfully. Whatever challenges the coming winter might bring, the path forward had been fundamentally altered. Where isolation had once defined her existence, connection now created purpose beyond mere survival. The unexpected gifts surrounding her cabin that morning after the blizzard had been merely the first tangible symbols of far greater treasures, the recognition that meaningful life emerges not through separation, but through bridges courageously built between previously divided worlds. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.